Welcome to part 6, the last part of this Football Manager 2018 experiment, where I prevented the top 6 clubs in England from making any transfers for 50 years. I'm sorry to see this experiment come to an end because I've thoroughly enjoyed this. It's probably been my favourite experiment for a long time, possibly ever. It's just been so intriguing seeing the journeys of these 6 teams down the English leagues. Some of them have done alright, some of them managed to sustain themselves at a certain level, others like Spurs have completely flopped, and it's been brilliant to see other teams replace them in the top 6. And of course in the last part 5, we saw Newcastle completely dominate England. If you have enjoyed this experiment, it'd be much appreciated if you can hit that like button. And if you have any ideas for future experiments, please put them in the comment section below. I'm open to lots of different ideas for experiment series. I've got a long list of possible ideas that I do add to whenever you guys make a good comment. So I will continue to add to that list and possibly use it in the future. So in this part 6, I've holidayed until May 2087, the end of the 2086-87 season, so 20 years after the end of part 5. And what we're going to do, we're going to find out how the likes of Manchester United, Man City, Liverpool, Arsenal, Spurs and Chelsea have coped since then. They're now able to make transfers. They've been able to make transfers for 20 years. Have they been able to recover? Are they back in the Premier League? Have they been able to even dislodge Newcastle as the top team in England, or are they going to become a yo-yo team between the Premier League and Championship, or perhaps even get stuck in League 1 and League 2? Let's find out. We'll start with the Premier League, where Newcastle have continued to dominate. They have won, look at this, is ridiculous. It's basically Celtic, or Barcelona or Bayern Munich, one of those teams. It's turned into a complete domination from Newcastle. There's no competitiveness to the top flight anymore, really. To start with, we saw lots of competitiveness once Man United's dominance had ended. It was between West Ham, Everton, Watford, Crystal Palace won it, Ipswich managed to win it for a few years. But ever since Newcastle have come in 2047, which is 40 years ago now, remember, we've only seen West Ham, Reading and Crystal Palace. 3 times in the last 40 years have we seen a different winner. That is ridiculous from Newcastle United. We will have a look at them in a bit more detail in a second, but let's have a look to see where the old top 6 teams have ended up. Obviously Newcastle have won it a record number of times now, the Premier League, but we've got Chelsea. They are the highest team. Well done to Chelsea. They managed to finish 9th this season. They in fact only got promoted back to the top flight for the first time in 2081. They got relegated straight away, but promoted once again in 2084. And they've spent the last 3 years doing quite well. They finished 4th in their first season back in after their second promotion. That is very impressive. So they obviously qualified for the Champions League that year. 4-star continental reputation, that's gone up. I think they went down to 2.5 at their worst. But you can see the journey. They were in League 2 when we left them in part 2. And it was actually the second season, I think, it took them to get promoted to League 1. Remember, they're able to spend money. If we look at their transfers and go all the way back to 2067, this was the first year they could spend money. They only spent 700k, but they were in League 2. They weren't going to spend millions because they wouldn't have been able to spend millions at that level. £2.2 million the next season, but they did sell £1.5 million. Then 4.3. As they started to progress up the leagues, they did start to spend more money, as you can see. I'm just going to skip through. 11.75, £20 million in 2074, and £56 million in 2076. Didn't spend anything that year. 9 million. 10.25 million, just quickly skip through. 70 million 2082 and 67 million, although they did sell a lot. 2085, 57 million, 55, and most recently 63 million pounds. So they've been spending a lot of money. Now they're back in the Premier League, especially they're able to spend a lot of money, but it did take them a while to get back to the Premier League. This is their most recent manager, Richard Rayner, an Englishman in charge of the club. They've had a lot of managers, haven't they? Xavi? That's a regen Xavi. Oh, it's great. These will all be regens now. You might notice someone, a real player, but it might not even be a real player. It might be a regen, of course. But so many managers over the years, it's crazy. But we have holidayed in total 70 years now into the future since the start of this experiment. It really is quite intriguing. These are their best players, by the way. Bob Bidgie, guy from the Netherlands. Facilities wise, they're still at the Eden Hazard Stadium, 35,000 seater stadium. Perhaps they'll be able to increase that at some point now that they've been in the top flight for a few years. The next best team is Manchester United, as you can see here. So they did get back to the top flight, and they did get back to it a few times. But look here, about 13 years ago, they started to become a yo-yo team between the Premier League and the Championship. Then spent a number of years stuck in the Championship, at the top of the Championship, before getting promoted as champions last year. And this year they survived 15th. The first time they survived in the top flight for decades. Because look at this, they were relegated every single time previously, but they've actually managed to survive. 3.5-star national reputation. They are rich. I'm sure they've... I didn't mean to click on the help button. I'm sure they've got plenty of money to spend because they are a Premier League team getting loads of TV money. And, of course, they do have Old Trafford still. They've kept Old Trafford the whole time. And they're back up to decent attendances, but nowhere near what they should be. Look, only 36,000 against Derby County. It just shows their reputation has completely dropped off. School kids around the country, they're supporting Newcastle United these days. Probably not even supporting anyone else because Newcastle are the top team quite clearly. So, yeah, you don't support Man United. Glory Hunters don't support Man United anymore. They support Newcastle United. So, absolutely intriguing stuff what's happened to Manchester United. They have managed to get back to the Premier League, but, they've only really spent 2 years in it. Well, this is their first year in it without getting relegated for many years, because remember in the last part they were stuck in League 2 and they did manage to buy their way to the Championship, but it took a long time for them to get out of the Championship. Let's just go back and look at the transfers quickly. So that first year they actually sold more than they spent, but the next season, I think this might have been League 2 or League 1, they spent £24.5 million, £70 million when they were in League 1. And then they started to spend lots of money when they were in the Championship, 65, then 78. It did vary year upon year, but they've spent more money than Chelsea, that's for sure, over the last few years. £190 million that season, and then £118 million. Just shows how much money they saved up over the years. And despite the fact they're not a massive club anymore, they don't get loads of people through the doors. They weren't getting Premier League TV money every year because they spent the majority of the time in the Championship. But they were still able to spend hundreds of millions of pounds because of all that money that was saved up over those 50 years, I suppose. That's my theory anyway. This is the team. Let's just have a look at their manager history. Lots of managers. Mourinho was in charge for a long time at the start, remember. But in fact he was in charge for almost 14 years. But since then they have gone through the managers. I don't think anyone stayed more than about 3 years, I don't think. So, where are the other teams? We'll find out in a second. I just want to look at Newcastle United. It's incredible. 5-star reputation. It really is absolutely insane what they have won. Look at that. 42 Premier League titles, if you include their 4 league titles before 2047, which was way long time ago. But yeah, since 2047, that is ridiculous. They've won the European Champions League multiple times as well, as you can see. Their Club World Championship, Super Cup, English FA Cup they've won multiple times. They've won the Carabao Cup multiple times. They are ridiculous. And they had a manager in charge. Morgan Schneiderlin was in charge for 25 years. And look how much he won. He must have been the best manager ever. He won 11 league titles, 30 cups. But then Andy Reid came along for 16 years and managed to win 17 league titles and 36 cup competitions. That is absolutely ridiculous. It really is. He was a regen as well, by the way, who played for non-league teams, and then he went on to be the best manager ever. That is special. How much money do they spend every year? 81 million. Although they're selling a lot as well. They obviously work the transfer market very well, as you can see here. But that is a story and a half. They've now got an 89,973 new stadium Andy Reid Stadium, named after the legendary manager. I bet Morgan Schneiderlin kind of, he must be a little bit annoyed because it could have been named after him. He's probably dead by now, to be fair. But yeah, it's called the Andy Reid Stadium. It was built 12 years ago, and they are a special team. This is just fascinating. Absolutely love it. I could do multiple parts on this experiment, but this is the last part. I'd love to do it again though, just to see what happens, see if anything different happens. This is the Championship then, where we do have Manchester City in 8th place. They have turned into a Championship team. I thought they were going to get back up to the top flight. Remember, at the end of part 5, we saw them get promoted to the Championship, but they've basically been in it ever since for the last 20 years, apart from one promotion where they were relegated straight away. They are now a Championship team. That is fascinating, because they were easily the best team in part 5. They were ahead of the rest of the pack. They were ahead of Chelsea and Manchester United, but those teams managed to buy their way back to the top flight. Man City haven't managed to. They've got the same reputation as Man United, and they still have their stadium, City of Manchester Stadium. And in terms of attendances, it's probably not that dissimilar to Manchester United, really. Looking at it, they're getting around about 30,000 people through the door. Manager-wise, they've had a lot of managers. But you can see here, they've not really kept anyone more than 5 years. Jason Price, as you can see there. In terms of spending money, if I just go back to the start, so that first year in the Championship, they spent £28.5 million. And then since then, they've not been massive spenders. £49 million in that year, 21.5, but they sold £38 million worth of players. 31.5. Remember, we didn't really see many players leaving the clubs as well over the years because they couldn't afford to sell players either because of not being able to buy players. So the transfer embargo has enabled them to really sell players for profit as well, and then try and bring better players in. But Man City have not been massive spenders, really. £43 million recent years. £72 million in the most recent season, though. So they are trying to spend money to get up to the top flight now. Financially, they're in a good position by the looks of it. And they do still have a front-end sugar daddy. I presume I wonder who it is. Where do I go to find staff? Here's the staff. Chairman is Roberto Perez, a Chilean. So the club is now, I assume he's the owner as well. They're owned by a Chilean chap. There's a Chilean director as well. That's really quite fascinating. This is the team. The best player is someone called Derek Matchell. He's got 1 cap for England, a goalkeeper. They seem to have good goalkeepers on this so far, I've noticed. Are there any other Championship teams then? Let's scroll down. Arsenal finished 10th on 69 points. And likewise, Championship team, they've not been promoted to the top flight. When was the last time they even played in the top flight? It was a long time ago. Remember, they were relegated to Vanarama South for one season, as you can see there. The last time they were in the Premier League was 2046. And considering they spent their entire history of Arsenal in the top flight, I think, well, since 2015, they were never, 1915, they were never relegated out of the top flight of England until 2029, and they've not been in the Premier League since 2000 and whatever, 46 or something like that. That is absolutely incredible. Look at all the managers they've had. So many managers. Obviously there's a lot of caretakers in here as well, but still, their most recent manager has been there a long time. I think they know their level. They know they're a Championship club. They've been close to promotion the last 2 seasons, in fact, but they just can't quite manage to go up. It's a little bit frustrating for them. This season they did drop off, though, down to 10th place with Mark Novak in charge. 3-star national reputation, so they are below Man City and Manchester United. Looking at their facilities, they still have the Arsene Wenger Stadium, 35,000-seater stadium, where they managed to get about 30,000 people turning up. So it's about the same as Man City, really, their attendances, but they do have a smaller stadium, so it might seem a bit more full. It does depend on who they play as to how many people turn up by the looks of it, as you can see there. Man City, 33,000 people turned up for that one, where they won 2-1. Transfer-wise, so they managed to buy their way out of League 2, but they've not been able to buy themselves into the Premier League. That's £1.1 million spent in that first season after the embargo ended. And I'll just scroll through There's no massive big spending from us. £33 million in 2073, but nothing obscene at the moment. There was a couple of years without spending anything. Then £51 million, that's quite a lot, to be fair. There's a surprising number of years where these clubs aren't spending any money. It's almost as if they've forgotten how to spend money, relying on their youth academies. £35 million spent that season, and most recently £12.75 million spent. And this is the best player at the club. He's from Peru. Did he start in Peru? No, he started he started in Peru. He didn't start at Arsenal. Facilities wise, all the clubs do have good facilities, good youth academies, so they're still very well run clubs. They've just ended up at very different points in the football pyramid compared to where they started. It's really quite intriguing. Anyway, let's go down. Who is next? I think that's all of the teams in the Championship. So 4 teams out of the 6 teams. There's 4 teams in the top 2 divisions, but Liverpool and Spurs are not. So we'll have to see where they are. Now, Liverpool have actually just got promoted to the Championship. So, back into the Championship they go. They did spend quite a few years in there. But likewise, like with Arsenal, they haven't managed to go up to the Premier League. This is where we left them in 2067. That first season, they didn't get promoted. But they were promoted to League One, relegated back down again, almost relegated out of League Two. Did survive, but 2 successive promotions to the Championship, relegated again, promoted again, relegated in 2084, and then they've managed to get back up to the Championship. So they're a bit of a yo-yo club. They're an interesting one. They've only got 2.5-star national reputation. They've obviously been through a lot of managers recently as well to try and get up the divisions. So many managers over the years. And let's look at their facilities. They've still got the Trent Alexander-Arnold Park with a 46,000-seater capacity. Is that bigger than it was in the previous part? Or was it? And maybe it was that size. I can't really remember off the top of my head. But let's look at the transfers and go back to the beginning of time. No, back to 2068. They only spent £44,500 in that first season they could spend money. But remember, they were probably the worst off out of the 6 teams in terms of money. They only had okay finances and didn't have as much money to spend on transfers, and it's taken them a while to really spend money, as you can see here. Slowly progressing. They were moving up the leagues and then moving back down the leagues during this time, but it wasn't until 2076 that they spent more than £1 million in one transfer window. This is a massive contrast to the other 4 teams that we've looked at already. There's just nothing being spent really, but they've still managed to get up to the Championship, which is the same level as Man City, same level as Arsenal. Man United, remember, have only just got promoted to the Premier League, and they spent hundreds of millions of pounds, whereas Liverpool have managed to get up to the Championship by spending very little money. £4.1 million last season and 375k this year. They sold £1.3 million, but they still got promoted. So I think Liverpool must be relying on their youth academy a bit more than the other teams. I'm guessing. I mean, they've produced a really good Spanish player here, 172 potential at the age of 16. So maybe they are relying on this youth academy a little bit more than the other teams. Anyway, it's attendance-wise, first home league game of the season, 31,000, which is not bad for League One, is it? I mean, they had 35,000 people turn up for a Carabao Cup second round match, which is unheard of. Checker Trade Trophy, of course, no one turned up, but yeah, that's really not bad attendances. It's the same as Man City and Arsenal, who are a division above. That's quite intriguing. Liverpool have done quite well, really, considering the position they were in Part 5. I think it was probably the worst position out of any team. Spurs, they had the worst time, didn't they? They had a torrid time on this experiment. They've been demolished a few times, really. But they have done really well, I must say, to recover, to get back into League One. Going through all those problems. Obviously, they had a lot of money to spend to get back to this level. They're a 2.5-star national reputation team once again. They went down to 1 star, remember. 1 star local team at one point down in the Vanarama National League. And we left them in the Vanarama National League in the last part. It took them a couple of years to get promoted to the Football League again, and then they were relegated 4 seasons later. But then 2 successive promotions to League One, and that's where they've been pretty much ever since. They did actually get up to the Championship last year. ahead of Liverpool, but relegated back down again. And let's look at their managers over the years. Lots and lots of managers. I think the biggest mistake was getting rid of Pochettino, and their biggest mistake in regards to players was selling all those goalkeepers at the very beginning, meaning they just completely flopped all the way down out of the Football League quite early on in this experiment. And they haven't been in the Premier League for a hell of a long time, have they? Look at this. When was the last time? It was 2025. That was the last time they were in the top flight of England. Spent so many years in non-league, but they're not a bad season this year in League One, but perhaps they can get back to Championship level at some point and hold on to that. Let's have a look at their transfers then. Go back to 2067-8 season. 245k they spent in that first year, but they did sell 200k worth of players, and I think similar to Liverpool, we're not going to see very many big transfer windows at all, if any. In fact, look at this. They've just not spent £1.5 million, 925k, but nothing above that, I don't think. £1.2 million a couple of years ago, £2.1 million last year, and this year 1.3, but they did sell quite a lot as well. So they're very similar to Liverpool, and they've still got the 13,632-seater stadium at the Harry Kane Park, built 32 years ago now. They're still stuck with that. Let's look at their attendances. First home game, 11,000. Carabao Cup, 4,000. They're not even filling the Harry Kane Stadium out. Not looking good for them, is it? In terms of attendance. I don't know how Liverpool are, considering they're at the same reputation as Spurs. They've obviously got a bigger stadium, but they're getting a lot more people through the gates despite being the same reputation. I'm not really... It might be down to population. Like Liverpool and Everton, they're the only two teams in Liverpool, whereas Spurs have a lot of London competition. I don't know if the game accounts for that whatsoever. This is the team, their best player. There's a guy on loan, in fact, and he's on loan from Leeds United. Fascinating stuff once again. Well, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to look at the cup competitions and Champions Leagues and that sort of thing. Obviously, we're not going to see any of the old top six featuring. In fact, we are. I tell a lie, because Manchester United have managed to win the FA Cup. They won it in 2018. That is a really impressive achievement, I must say. Obviously, they dominated this experiment right at the start when they were still able to. But to actually go and win the FA Cup through all the adversity is very impressive. And remember, Newcastle, the dominating force in England now. Anyone to win it other than Newcastle is pretty damn impressive, I think. But we have seen Newcastle dominate. It's the same old teams of Palace, Everton, Reading, featuring Leeds. Won't manage to win it a couple of times in the last 20 years. West Ham seem to have completely dropped off. They've turned into a bit of a mid-table Premier League team now, after many years doing very well. Carabao Cup, Reading have won the last two. Crystal Palace featuring Barnsley. We've seen Barnsley they've done quite well on this. They have a Premier League team, 4-star reputation. They've produced a lot of English talent, and I'm just interested to see what their facilities are like. That's their finance. They're a bit in debt, as you can see there, but facilities, looking at this, they've got some really good facilities, and they've got a big stadium, Barnsley Stadium, as you can see there. So they've done really well on this as well, quietly just below the likes of Newcastle, Palace, Reading, Ipswich, but they've done pretty well really on the whole. This is the Community Shield, Checker Trade Trophy for those interested. West Ham under-23s featuring there, FA Trophy, and the under-23s. So Newcastle dominating that competition as well, as you can see. Champions League then. Who's managed to win this competition in the last 20 years from England? Obviously, Newcastle have managed to win it 3 more times, but they haven't won it for quite a while, as you can see there. They featured in a few finals, along with Crystal Palace, once again. But Fulham have managed to win the Champions League, beating Newcastle in the 2082 final. That's really impressive. To beat Newcastle as well. But Fulham also runners-up in the last couple of years. Paris, PSG, they've seemed to have done very well from a European standpoint, but yeah, Newcastle on the whole have been pretty incredible, but impressive wins during this experiment from Reading, Crystal Palace and Fulham. Euro Cup wise, West Ham have managed to win that competition. Reading have won it a couple of times. Leicester, Fulham, Everton, Leeds, Reading, Middlesbrough managed to win it. I think did we see that in the last part? Ipswich have been runners up. They've sort of dropped off a little bit lately as well, haven't they? Look at that dominance, well, in the top 4 regularly, and then they've dropped off a little bit. Still a worldwide 4.5-star reputation though. World Cup wise, we can see that Uruguay have won the most recent one. Since the last part, we've seen Germany win it, but Wales have won the World Cup, beating Germany in the 2074 final in Brazil. That is a turn up for the books. They're currently 23rd in the rankings. I mean, since their win, they've been pretty average by the looks of it, but they've managed to win the World Cup, which is just incredible. Turkey reached the final, losing to Argentina. South American teams dominated the last few years, as you can see there. The Euros have been won in recent years. Germany, Italy, Spain and Holland. England have managed to reach the final once. So England, 11th in the world rankings at the moment. This chap, Ian Williams, is the manager. Top 6 teams in England at the end of this experiment then are Newcastle, Crystal Palace, Reading, Fulham, Everton and Ipswich. This is the reputation wise. We've got 3 teams with 5-star reputation. Last time there was only 1 with Newcastle, but Crystal Palace and Reading also have 5-star reputation. Reading, by the way, 62,000 seater stadium. Crystal Palace, 53,000 seater stadium. Fulham, the Fulham Stadium, they've got rid of Craven Cottage, 65,000 seater stadium. That is, I mean, in fact, let's just look at this at this raw format. The biggest stadium in England. Oh wow, that is fascinating. West Ham have built a new stadium. They've got rid of the London Stadium by this point, and they've built the Trevor Brookings Stadium, not the Bobby Moore Stadium, the Trevor Brookings Stadium. He is a legend from literally 100 or more years ago now. That is intriguing. Built 9 years ago. They didn't name it after one of the more recent legends that won them the league, won them multiple competitions during this experiment. They've named it after an old legend. West Ham didn't win the league back then, but they've named it after him. Old Trafford is now the 3rd biggest stadium in the Premier League. Ipswich got the 4th biggest, but that's huge. That Newcastle Stadium is massive, isn't it? But it really is fascinating, all this stuff. Looking at this, Elland Road, Hillsborough still the same. Molineux has been expanded. Goodison Park's been expanded. We've seen that previously. Steve Gibson Arena for Middlesbrough. I love this. The Championship. The biggest stadium is Man City Stadium. Bournemouth up there as well. Stadium of Light. Pretty big as you'd expect. Let's look at finances then. So, turnover wise, Newcastle have easily the biggest turnover, £497 million. Then it's Leicester. We've got Arsenal up there, despite the fact they're in the Championship. QPR up there as well, despite being in the Championship, which is quite fascinating. Man City, Southend have a bigger turnover than Man City and Liverpool. And Man United not doing very well, all the way down there. 26th biggest turnover in England. They used to have the biggest turnover in the world, and now they're all the way down in 26th in England. But they are in the Premier League, so that might improve in the future if we were to get into the future. Let's look at season ticket holders. So Newcastle and West Ham are the 2 biggest stadiums, as you would expect. That's the average ticket price. West Ham, Sheffield Wednesday and Everton charging £50 a ticket. Up there are Leeds, Chelsea as well. Newcastle, who... Where are Newcastle? They're the best team in the country, and they're given value for money to their fans. It's only £33.61 to go to see them, which is cheaper than some Championship clubs, as you can see there. That's pretty amazing. I love all this stuff. It's amazing. World rankings of England. I don't know why I'm looking at that. Best 11. That doesn't mean anything because they're all regens. Oh, Dele Alli's in there though. Oh, I can still click on him. Retired from Everton at the age of 36. This is the team then, the England team. And these are all the clubs involved. Man United players are back in the England team. So, and Man City. Barnsley. I said Barnsley featured. But once again, Newcastle, only 2 players despite being the best team in the country. This guy, Sahinkaya, murdered that pronunciation, I know. What a player, 76 goals. In fact, I want to look at the records for England. Who's the top goal scorer? It's Colin Harper, who I remember playing for Newcastle way back when. Started at Barnsley as well. I said Barnsley had done amazing. He scored 135 goals in 146 games, and he came from Barnsley. This is the most expensive English player ever, David Noakali, who went from Fulham to Newcastle for £79 million. Absolutely fascinating. I'm starting to lose my voice. I'm going to have to end this here. Don't think I've forgotten anything. Or the European International League, but I don't think many people really care about that. These are the past winners of that competition for those of you interested. But we'll end it here on the Premier League screen. So Chelsea end up finishing the highest out of the top 6. But maybe in the comment section below, let me know your thoughts about this experiment in general. Which team, surprised you the most, either doing well or badly? Newcastle fans, I bet you're wishing this comes true in the future, although a lot of you will be dead by the time it actually happens, I suppose. But yeah, it's been incredible stuff. Thank you for watching this experiment. Until next time, enjoy FM18 and I'll see you very soon.